Hello and welcome back to another episode of Hear the Cannons. I am your host, Colin Hallboom, writer for BucsGameday, which is Sports Illustrated's only website dedicated specifically to covering the Tampa Bay Buccaneers. I am joined, as always, by some of my colleagues over at BucsGameday. We got JC Allen, Caleb Skinner, River Wells. If you're watching us on YouTube, their Twitter handles are right there on the screen for you. So give those gentlemen a follow. And while you're at it, make sure you're getting all your Bucs content over at BucsGameday.com. Please, if you are watching on YouTube, hit that subscribe button, share, like, turn on the notifications, all that good stuff. Supports the show a great deal. Don't be shy to rate and review us on your audio streaming platforms as well. We are available wherever you get your podcasts. Now, this is an exciting episode. I'm jacked up, and I know whoever's watching this is jacked up because finally we have regular season NFL action just over the horizon, a few days away. The season kicks off tomorrow night, and for the Bucs, it'll be on Sunday at 4:25 versus the Washington Commanders. Gentlemen, how are you feeling? It's been a busy offseason. I know a lot of you guys, like all of you guys, have been down at one Buccaneer. You've been traveling the great state of Florida, River, in your case. How are you feeling? Are you guys ready to get going or what?
Absolutely. Big time. Can't wait.
Love it. Awesome.
I'm excited.
Yeah, we're excited. Yeah.
Thank you. I thought I set someone up for that, so thank you, JC.
There you go.
And for anyone who doesn't know, that's a reference to Todd Bowles' exuberance at his press conference earlier today, because he is excited, and so are we.
Quite a fun press conference, yeah.
I set Caleb up perfect. Let's see if he follows up with it. Caleb, you gonna follow up with it?
I don't know where we're at talking wise. JC, you're like over here, and everybody else is on schedule.
Baker came on afterwards and said, "I'm excited too."
My reaction is going to be way off of based on everybody else's thing right now. But yeah, super stoked about football finally being here. Enough of the projecting, enough of the list and the rankings and the tiers. I'm completely over it. I expressed my displeasure with that today amongst you guys. I'm just ready for football to be here and, for the ball to finally kick off. And we're here, we just got a few days until that happens in Raymond James. So super stoked about it.
And, that was more or less an imitation of Baker Mayfield because he was a little more stoic there, JC. Maybe he didn't directly imitate Baker like you were hoping. But I want to take everyone's attention. It says predictions. We're going to get into some season-long predictions from each of us here. But I want us to use JC's recent article, win-loss projection, up on BucsGameday.com. He gave us his season prediction for the Buccaneers, and he took us through each matchup of the season. JC, you had the Buccaneers going 11-6. For anyone who hasn't read the article yet, and again, you should head over there and check it out because he gives a great rationale for each of his picks. JC, how do the Bucs get to 11-6 based on your projections there? Are there any surprises? I mean, if anyone's listening, even if they haven't read the article, they kind of deserve to hear it from the horse's mouth,
I appreciate it. Yeah, it's a rough start. I'm not going to sugarcoat that. I think there are some difficult games for them on the docket. I think that they are going to struggle with some of these games. Some surprising losses as well. I think if you kind of look at what I laid out there, and I'm sure we'll get into it if you want me to go into detail, I can. But there's some divisional losses that maybe some people weren't expecting, but 5-5 at the bye week in week 11, and then they get into that softer part of the schedule. And I think that bye week, unlike last year's week 5 bye week, certainly helps them a lot more in week 11, where reminiscent of that Super Bowl year. Now, I'm not saying the Super Bowl contenders this year, but that later bye week lets them to rest up, recover. There's going to be bumps and bruises at that point. Lets them kind of really look back and say, okay, this is what really worked for us. This is what we've had some struggles on. Our losses, this is where kind of we went sideways. Let's focus on us. Let's focus on our identity, what has worked, and really apply that to the next, 6-7 games of the season. And I think they turn it around there. Maybe a shocking loss to New Orleans Saints in there, a shocking win over the San Francisco 49ers on their way to an 11-6 record. And if you read the end of it, spoiler alert, I have them making the NFC Championship game. So I think the Bucs are being slept on by national media. If you cover them locally, there's plenty of reason for optimism after the offseason, after what we've seen so far in preseason with the additions of the offensive line and some of the young playmakers they have. They went from oldest to youngest, almost youngest, in 2 years, through the draft and through some really key savvy signings and re-signings on this team. So 11-6 is where I have them, and kind of outside of some of the top teams like the 49ers and maybe the Detroit Lions, kind of right in that mix for the number 3, number 4, at least number 4, but maybe that number 3 seed in the NFC.
Yeah, JC, I totally agree, and I like how you referenced that Super Bowl run, because the Bucs really came storming out of the bye week that season, and that's when they put together that stretch of wins. This season is so well set up for that to happen again. I would not be shocked if they reeled off 7 straight wins to end the season and had a losing record prior to that bye week. Like, I could see something like that happening. I love the 11-6 number. I'm at the same mark myself when I did the exercise just for kicks. But I didn't have them beating the San Francisco 49ers, dude. And the Bucs have struggled in their most recent matchups with that football team. Really talented top to bottom. Yeah. Tell me why you think they get it done this year against the Niners.
They lost that game last year, really, I think. I mean, the year before they got shellacked. I mean, they were just beaten badly with Tom Brady in his final season. But last year, they a lot closer to winning that game than they were losing that game. And I think when you look at the way the Niners are set up, I think a similar situation can happen this year where they can limit the impact as much as kind of a CMC and kind of control the flow of the game. And it's one of these things. Obviously, the 49ers are a tremendously talented team, but the Bucs, if they're going to pull something off, they're going to pull a win off. I have more confidence over them against a team like the 49ers than I do against the Kansas City Chiefs, the Baltimore Ravens, or the Detroit Lions. And I just think if they can play, again, this is all predicated, same thing with my predictions, on being fairly healthy. And last year, when the Bucs lost a lot of their games last year, it's because they beat themselves. I think, they focused on committing less mental errors, MEs as they call them. And if they can do that, I think penalties will come down for them. They're going to be in a really good position to upset some teams, and I think that's one of them that's going to happen against the 49ers.
Now, River, I want to get your take. First off, if you have a season-long prediction, we'd love to hear it. But do you agree with JC that the Buccaneers are destined to drop at least one game to the Saints, or do you think they could make Bucs fans happy and sweep that season series?
I have around 9-8 or 10-7. One of those two. I do have them winning the NFC South, and I wouldn't be surprised if the Atlanta Falcons ended up doing it. However, I'm a little trepidatious about certain aspects of Atlanta that makes me believe that with the continuity that Tampa Bay has and some of the pieces that they got to improve the team, that I think they can do it again, and I think they will. 11 might be a lot, but again, it's only one more than 10-7, so you never know in that case. But we'll see how it goes. I, in particular, am very low on the Saints this year. Very, very low on the Saints. I think it's going to be a 2-horse race between Tampa Bay and Atlanta. I think the Saints are an old team, and eventually, I'm going to keep saying that every year. That's going to happen, and the dam's going to break on that, and then eventually it will have to. Derek Carr played well at the last stretch last year, but I think it's going to be Tampa Bay and Atlanta, and I do have the Bucs sweeping the Saints. Actually, I think they'll probably sweep the Panthers too, and I think it's really going to come down to those early games against Atlanta. They play Atlanta twice pretty early in the year, and that's going to be where the division lies.
Do you think they split the season series with Atlanta?
I had them in my predictions. I had them sweeping Atlanta. Or not sleeping, sorry, splitting. I had them losing at home and then winning on the losing. I'm a mess. They will lose on the road to Atlanta, and then when they come back home for Creamsicle Day, they will break the Creamsicle curse and they will win that game.
Yes. You are a mess. You are a mess, but you're not as much of a mess as the Saints, because I don't think there's any way. I think the Bucs are taking both those games, and I'm with you, man. I think the Saints are on the way out. I think all these years of clinging on to something that's been slowly slipping out of the grasp of Mickey Loomis and their coaching staff over there, all these aging players, I think this is the year where they really kind of hit rock bottom and maybe we'll eventually make that decision to turn the roster over. Caleb, I'm going to throw to you, and I want to know, when this season's all said and done, who are we going to look back at? Let's focus on the offensive side of the ball. And you can't say your boy Baker Mayfield because that's too easy. Who do you think will be like the MVP of the offense?
No, it's got to be Mike Evans. Obviously the attention is going to be on the offensive line because it looks different. But if they are playing well up to the level that they're supposed to be, nobody's going to be really paying attention to them, just making sure that they're good to go, and they are. So then you're going to need Mike Evans to have another Mike Evans season. We saw kind of his rapport with Baker Mayfield grow as the year progressed in 2023. That's only, probably been worked on consistently over this offseason more and more and more. So they should be right on par with each other. So Mike Evans, another 1,000-yard year, being big in the end zone once again is going to be huge for the Buccaneers offense. Without him, it'll be tough, kind of to see where that goes because he is that game changer on the opposite side of the ball. You could also point towards, the running back room and Rachaad White because of how lackluster the running back room was. But ultimately, this comes down to Mike Evans having another Mike Evans year. And as long as that happens, I don't see the Bucs offense struggling all that much here in 2024.
Okay. And JC, what about on the defensive side? I'm not going to ask you to name the MVP, but the Bucs have a number of guys. Who's going to step up this year? Last year we saw a huge leap, a huge debut for Yaya Diaby. Antoine Winfield Jr. obviously was out of this world. Hopefully he can come somewhere close to replicating that, but that'd be hard to do based on just how productive of a season it was. You got like a defensive X factor for us? Someone who you think is really going to come to play this year for the Bucs?
Yeah, I think it's a guy who we had on the podcast earlier this season. I am all aboard the Zion McCollum hype train. True. Climb on board before it's too late. I think he's going to have a phenomenal season this year. There's a lot of doubt in him from fans, and I kind of reminisce it back last year with Luke Gedeke when I told everyone, relax, Luke is going to be fine at right tackle. Relax. Zion's going to be fine at cornerback. He's going to be more than fine. He's going to develop. I think he's going to turn in, establish himself as an above average corner, not an elite corner, but an above average corner that can sway some games for you potentially with some interceptions. I think I have him in my bold predictions at finishing with 5 interceptions, and I have him as my breakout player of the year. I think I've wrote about that several times. And I think, when you look at last season, he started 9 games at cornerback, also played time at safety, also played time at nickelback. He talked about it on the podcast. That allowed him to see and really know everyone's role in that defensive backfield and kind of know where he's going to have help. Made him play smarter, allows him to play faster without utilizing the speed as a crutch or as a recovery, but actually as someone that he can, as something that he can use as a tool to break on balls. And he's immensely improved as a tackler. And again, get that Carolina game out of your head from his rookie season. That's not the player he is. You weren't complaining about him last year when he was starting in place of Jamel Dean and Carlton Davis. I think he's going to have a phenomenal season this year. And then Yaya and Kalijah are 2 other guys I think really are going to stand out.
Okay, and one of the things I love about our editor-in-chief over here at BucsGameday, and I'm talking about River Wells. I like that River, he doesn't sugarcoat things. He doesn't just tell you what you want to hear, Bucs fans. He's not afraid to bring in a little bit of negativity, if you will. I mean that in a complimentary way, River. So I'm gonna ask you, who is the player who Bucs fans are going to end up being disappointed with this season? Like, who's going to not perform like people are thinking they will?
Man, what a way to introduce that. This is a good question, Colin.
Please,
we're going to be a locker room tomorrow. Remember?
Yeah.
The pressure is on.
They watch us. They watch these shows, man.
That's a good.
I want you to
question.
say. I want you to say Zion McCollum just so we can have some engaging content.
Well, I am not the biggest Zion fan, but I'm not gonna say Zion McCollum. I'm actually gonna say Rachaad White. I am not as into Rachaad White as some people are. I think in space he's very lethal, a lot of all-purpose yards last year, but I still think he has some problems as a runner that I'm not sure are going to get erased by the interior offensive line being shored up. And Bucky Irving should help spell him on some cases, but I think he still has a long way to go to develop as running back, and I think he might not be the instant dynamo that some Bucs fans are expecting. He's not. I don't think he's going to bust off like 4.5 yards per carry all of a sudden. He struggled a little bit in the run game last year. I think we'll still see a little bit of those struggles going forward. And as long as they can use him in the pass game like they did last year, he'll still be definitely, I think, a beneficial player. But I think if you're expecting him to have a huge breakout year, you would be disappointed.
Okay. All right. I like it. This is good stuff here. Now, we've talked a little bit about the full season, a couple predictions in there. I think it's time for us to zero in on the game that is just a few days away. And of course, that is the week 1 matchup versus the Washington Commanders. And I know just the guy we need to talk to, and that is none other than David Harrison. A lot of you Buccaneers fans will be familiar with David Harrison because he is one of the voices of Locked On Bucs for so long. He does Locked On Commanders now. So he is still covering the Bucs though for us here at BucsGameday. So he's a busy guy and he knows the Commanders as well as anyone. And he just so happens to produce this show for us. So hypothetical round of applause for our boy David DH in the building. He loves that. He loves that.
You can tell. Look at him.
David, man. Okay.
Is the view behind the mic right now.
Love it. David, how does Jaden Daniels look, man? I'm going to leave it open-ended. Like from, we're the opponents here. So we're trying to see, like, how good does he really look this whole offseason, his first NFL offseason?
Yeah, man, he looks incredibly poised is how he looks. And, the analogy that I've kind of used multiple times is that if his house was on fire, he would collect all of his valuables and walk out of the building. Like this dude does not have a panic button. And obviously Todd Bowles and the Buccaneers defense are going to try to find that panic button. And if it happens, it'll be the first time I've seen it. So it'll be really interesting to see how he does against, the first NFL defense that's actually scheming against him, trying to play a lot of games. And I think it's really important to remember that when you're talking about a rookie who's had a really good training camp in preseason is there hasn't been a lot of, mixing up things and a lot of looks that he's going to see here on the field. And, Todd Bowles might be one of the worst defensive coordinators to go against if you're a rookie quarterback for those reasons. But, for all that, like a lot of the concerns about him coming into the NFL, the intermediate throws, the over the middle throws. And, I'm not going to say that we haven't seen a high throw here or there or an errant throw here or there, but for the most part, he's answered all of those questions, right? And those are things that he's been able to do in training camp and in the joint practices against the Dolphins and the Jets, just being really smart with the football and making sure that defenders don't have an opportunity to come away with an interception. I think, I chart every starting quarterback throw through training camp. And I think I've charted one turnover-worthy throw. And, that's stealing a PFF, metric or whatever. And maybe if they came out, they disagree. But for me, he's had one turnover-worthy throw, only threw one interception in 11s the entire time. So one turnover-worthy throw outside the interception, I should say. And that's pretty impressive. No matter how many years you've been in the NFL, it's hard to only throw one interception in 11 on 11s, throughout an entire training camp and 2 joint practices. So he's looked very good in the small sample size that we've gotten so far.
David, I'm curious whether you have any insight, or maybe it's just a prediction from your own, observations throughout the offseason, but how much do you think Cliff Kingsbury is going to focus or utilize Jaden Daniels' legs within his offense? Like, is that going to be a huge part of their offense? Are they going to try and, rubber glove their prize rookie franchise quarterback for a little bit? What do you think is going to happen in terms of the scheme?
Yeah, I don't know if I would say it's going to be a huge part of their scheme. It's certainly going to be a part of it, right? And they're going to bleed off of that. They're going to have play actions. You're going to have option plays and things like that. So they'll threaten to use him as a runner, right, in a way to kind of open up some other things. So in that aspect, it's certainly going to be a part of the game plan. Of course, Cliff Kingsbury coming from the background he does, quarterback Kyler Murray, all those things, that's going to be a part of that. But really, the emphasis is really going to be on Jaden Daniels making smart plays. So a lot of the times where he does run the ball, it's going to be a lot of option opportunities. So they're going to lean on Jaden and say, look, when you have the opportunity to run, it's not necessarily the best thing for you to do. Go ahead and get rid of the ball, hand it to your back, and let them kind of make those plays that they're paid to do. But you are going to see a good amount of designed runs as well. So yeah, his athleticism certainly it's part of the reason you draft him number 2 overall. So it's going to be part of the reason you lean on him to try to help you win some ball games.
I got one more before we pass it off to one of these guys to ask you a question. And what I want to know, David, is why did the Commanders trade Jahan Dotson? Because as an outsider, he's a talented receiver, like a former, I believe, first-round pick your young quarterback needs weapons. I mean, it seems like there's not a ton of depth at the receiver position on this team. Can you please explain to me the motivation behind that?
Yeah, I mean, the best, I like analogies. So the analogy I can use is a rifle without a firing pin isn't much of a weapon, right? So it might look like a weapon, but if he's not going to be used properly in the context you have him, it's not going to work out. And that's really what happened with Jahan Dotson. Like coming into training camp in the offseason and everything, they started him off outside. He was kind of that number 2 receiver behind Terry McLaurin. And quite honestly, just wasn't finding space, wasn't getting open all that much. Had one really good practice in training camp where he came down with like 6 catches, a bunch of sideline balls, things like that. But outside of that, really just kind of disappeared. And then in the first joint training camp practice, kind of disappeared in the games, all those things. And, we saw the Commanders really put him out there a lot. Like he led the team in reps from a receiver standpoint in the first preseason game of the year. And then you eventually saw them move him into the slot. Now, once they moved him in the slot, we all kind of have this vision in our head of your slot receiver is your number 3, right? When in reality, it's just your starting slot receiver. You can call it whatever you want to call it, but that looks like a demotion to the number 3 spot. But really what it was the Commanders trying to say, okay, well, you're not working on the perimeter. Let's see if we can put you in the slot where you usually have a little bit more space to operate against a defensive back, and maybe some of that athletic ability will shine, and it still just wasn't happening. So, at the end of the day, this staff from general manager Adam Peters to head coach Dan Quinn, all the way down to the position coaches, have all just kind of said, like, if you're the version of a Commander player that we want, we're going to keep you. If not, we're going to move on. It doesn't have to be that you're a bad guy or a bad player or a lazy player or anything like that. It's just not a fit. So what they did is they found a team that thought Jahan might be a fit with them, and they were willing to give them some draft capital back. So now the Commanders are going to move forward, let Jahan have a fresh start in Philly, which I can tell you that he's excited for his fresh start, for his new opportunity. And the Commanders get draft picks where they hope that next year, whether they make the pick or use it to trade, they're going to be able to bring in more players that do fit what they're trying to do. And if you look at what they did, they're starting, quote unquote slot receiver is Olamide Zaccheaus, who Bucs fans will remember from his days with the Atlanta Falcons. He's bigger than Jahan Dotson. He's got the ability to play more physical. He's not the most physical dude in the world, but he's got the ability to play bigger. I should say he plays bigger than Jahan Dotson. Olamide is like 5'8", 5'9", so he's not a big dude, but he plays bigger and does better against physical contact from slot defenders. And then they go out and get Noah Brown, who spent a lot of time in the slot in Houston, spent a lot of time in the slot in Dallas, and he is legitimately bigger. The dude's listed as 6'2", looks like he's 6'4". So when you look at the type of players that they're now putting in the slot versus Jahan Dotson, it's pretty clear that he just wasn't a fit for what they're trying to do.
Yeah, it adds up, and I was kind of going to feed into, the wide receiver depth and, kind of what that is going on, but you kind of addressed that with talking about Noah Brown, Olamide Zaccheaus. So let's just go over the defensive side of the ball for the Commanders real quick, David. A whole lot of attention seems to be more geared towards the defensive line and the linebackers and what the Commanders were able to do there this offseason. We did know that the Commanders secondary was, if not the worst, one of the worst in
they're the worst
in all of football last year. And a lot of that was, youngness, a lot of guys in the wrong position, not having a good coach back there, all of it all into one. What makes you be a little bit more optimistic now? They are bringing back some of the similar guys, but it's kind of a revamped secondary. Do you expect them to kind of take just maybe a minor step or maybe a giant step since, Dan Quinn is going to be the head coach and he's very defensive minded?
Yeah. So if I have confidence that the Washington Commanders secondary can be better this year versus last year, it's going to be because Mike Sainristil, the rookie out of Michigan, has looked like a very solid improvement in the slot over what they had last year, which last year, primarily in the beginning of the season, especially your slot was veteran Danny Johnson, who's no longer with the team, and then rookie Quan Martin, who's now the Washington Commanders free safety, and he's been able to spend this entire offseason training as that free safety, and that's where he kind of played towards the end of last season and showed his most NFL potential. So you like the move of Quan Martin back to free safety. You like Mike Sainristil in the slot. I would be remiss if I didn't, if I lied and said, Mike Sainristil at, again, 5'8" or so, going up against slots like Chris Godwin, I don't know. It's like Steph Curry guarding Tim Duncan in the paint. I don't know if it's going to work out too well, but we'll see. Mike Sainristil certainly is going to give Chris and whoever else comes into the slot against them as much work as they can possibly can. But, we'll see how the physicality wins out at the end. Where I have concerns still is, the worst pass defense, the worst secondary in the National Football League last year by a wide margin. And If you count Quan Martin, who again did start in nickel, started a free safety for them last year, 3/5 of that worst NFL secondary are returning. Emmanuel Forbes and Benjamin St-Juste are your first unofficial depth chart starting outside cornerbacks. They've been the guys getting the first team reps all preseason and training camp. Quan Martin is back there at free safety. I think he's taken a step forward. Certainly, he's not Antoine Winfield Jr. You know what I mean? So he's not that. Jeremy Chin is your new starting strong safety. Doesn't have coverage ability. The Carolina Panthers figured that out last year. So when he comes down into the box, which he's going to do, and they bring another safety on, it's going to be either Derek Forrest or Percy Butler, who were also a part of the worst pass defense secondary in the NFL. So there's a lot of familiar faces from the worst secondary in the league last year. Where the Commanders are really going to try to work to make things better is one, coaching. Look, bottom line up front, the coaching last year was terrible. It just was. It was just terrible. There's people inside the organization that will admit to you that the coaching was not even subpar. Like subpar would be a compliment for what happened in the locker room or on the coaching staff last year. So that certainly matters. But the pass rush, that's really where Joe Witt Jr., the new defense coordinator, and Dan Quinn, a defensive-minded head coach, are really trying to impact the secondary because we've seen it. If you have the greatest quarterback of all time and he's out less than 2 seconds to get rid of the ball, he's not going to be able to pick you apart. The Pittsburgh Steelers proved that a couple of years ago. But my concern, and I think it's a very valid concern, is even if your pass rush can get to Baker Mayfield 2.5 seconds or less, let's say 15 times, that's a pretty good game. You still got a whole lot of other snaps that you're not getting to Baker Mayfield, and that secondary's got to cover, or else he's going to turn that 2nd and 13, 14, whatever it is, into a touchdown or into a first down or a 3rd and 4, right? So we'll see how it turns out, but that's the weak spot of this defense, bar none.
And shifting over to, obviously, as Caleb said, everyone's talking about Darren Payne. Everyone's talking about Jonathan Allen, Frankie Louvu, and Bobby Wagner, but they brought in a slew of edge rushers as well. Former failed pick Clelin Ferrell from the Raiders, journeyman Dante Fowler, who's been all over the place, and then a guy who was interesting and I think was on some Bucs fans' radar, certainly on my radar as potential fit for the Bucs, Dorrance Armstrong from Dallas. Yeah. How have they looked? Do they obviously no Montez Sweat, right, out of the group, and maybe not even a Chase Young when he was in his prime, but how have they looked? What kind of expectations do you have for them this season, and especially this week going up against Tristan Wirfs and a very much improved Edekey at right tackle?
Yeah, I think it's going to be really interesting to see how it all comes together, right? Because Clelin Ferrell, one of the reasons he busted out as bad as he did in Vegas is they thought they could turn him into a pass rusher, and the bottom line is he's not. That's not his skill set. So you're never going to draft a run fit, strong at the point of attack defensive end as a top 5 pick. Nobody's going to ever do that, and that's unfortunately what they did. In that role, he's certainly serviceable. But what that means is you've got to find a way to get at the quarterback on that side of the line of scrimmage and not rely on Clelin Ferrell. So that's where outside linebackers like Dante Fowler, who you mentioned, they're going to try to play off of that, maybe get Clelin to eat a couple of blocks or do something with shifts or twists or stunts. And maybe you get that D tackle to kind of eat up a guard and isolate that tackle so that Dante Fowler maybe can come free. Frankie Louvu is going to do a lot of the kind of stuff that you saw Devin White do well when he was in Tampa, and apparently you're not going to see him do it all in Philly. And then on the other side of the ball, like you said, Dorrance Armstrong, if he can't win against Tristan Wirfs, which I would probably bet that he's going to lose more than he's going to win against Tristan Wirfs, they're kind of hoping a guy like maybe Jamin Davis on the other side of that ball can take advantage of now maybe getting an outside edge or being able to crash inside and go up against a less proven interior offensive lineman. So I think that's going to be a lot of where it comes from. But also Dorrance Armstrong has the ability to move around the line of scrimmage as well. So don't be surprised if you don't necessarily see Dorrance take every rep against Tristan Wirfs. I think he'd probably appreciate not having to take every rep against Tristan Wirfs. His agent certainly would appreciate it, right? But, they're going to play a lot of games. They're going to bring guys. It's going to be a very Todd Bowles-esque, right, type of scheme. You're going to see Jeremy Chin blitz from the secondary. I think you're going to see Quan Martin blitz from the secondary. I don't know how much I would expect to see a cornerback blitz other than Mike Sanders still. I think that's something he did well in Michigan, so you certainly could see him do that as well. But yeah, you're going to see a lot of games, and they're not going to try to say, like, Dorrance, you go beat Tristan Wirfs, and that's how we're going to get to Baker Mayfield. It's going to be a lot of playing off each other and doing these things that creative D coordinators like Todd Bowles like to do.
Yeah, I have a question for you, David, and it involves the culture in Washington, because that's been a big talking point about this team in particular over the past few years. You had Ron Rivera there, you had Dan Snyder, and now you don't. Now you've got Harris. Now you got Dan Quinn at head coach. You got Josh Peters, general manager. Cliff Kingsbury in there, and a whole slew of new players. So I wanted to ask you, going into this game against the Bucs in Week 1, what's the mentality like in Washington, and how much is that culture improved or not in your eyes, seeing that you have boots on the ground, and how could that affect the game? Affect the team that wants to go out and win immediately with this brand new sort of look.
Yeah, I mean, look, this team is night and day different. Like the team that I'm covering this year is not the team I was covering last year, and we all say that, right? Because every year the team changes. But I mean, it's like a completely different franchise. In fact, speaking of Jahan Dotson, at one point he had said it felt like he got traded, but he was still actually in the same spot. Lo and behold, he didn't realize that he was actually being very prophetic in that. But now, it's like this Washington Commanders team. So the last Washington Commanders team was very externally motivated. When they played a really good team, you can see them try really hard to do really well, and they just kind of react on what's going on around them. This team is much more internally motivated, like a cat who wants love, and they're just going to jump up on the desk no matter what you're doing to get your attention. They want what they want. They want to do what they want to do, and they're going to go do it. That's what this team's mentality is. They feel like they have the horses. Sam Cosmi, offensive lineman, who just got his extension on Wednesday, actually went as far as to say, I feel like we have the guys in here to go do what we're wanting to do, which, of course, every team wants to win the Super Bowl, right? That's why you do this, to quote the great Bruce Arians, for an effing ring. So, I don't know that everybody else would have the same confidence that they have the horses they need to go do that this year, but this is a group that certainly understands that they have talent, they have the potential, and the greatest part about it is none of them has to be the superhero. None of them's got to be the Tom Brady. None of them needs to be the Antoine Winfield Jr. They all just need to kind of be where they are, do what they need to do, and allow the plays to make themselves. And that's kind of how they're going to rely on things, again, as well as things have gone. If the Bucs put up 28 points in the first quarter and a half, we'll see if that sticks. But, for right now, that's the atmosphere.
Right.
Usually takes the Bucs a little bit to get going, a bit longer than that on the scoreboard. If we're going off last year.
All right, David, I got one more here for you, then we'll let you go. It's a two-parter, and it's kind of just your opinion. If the Commanders are going to win this game, they need to do X, Y, Z. And if the Bucs are going to lose this game, it's because of X, Y, Z.
Yeah, so I'll give you X, Y, Z. Offense, defense, special teams. Protect Jane Daniels. That includes Jane Daniels protecting himself, not taking unnecessary hits. Defensively, they got to tackle this Buccaneers squad. I'm not telling you guys anything you don't know. If this Commanders defense misses tackles, it's going to get bad, especially with Rashad White and Bucky Irving, and then make their kicks. The Washington Commanders are on their fourth kicker since the beginning of training camp, one of them because of off-the-field issues, two of them because they just did not make kicks. So Cade York comes in. He was 4 for 4 with Cleveland before they traded for him, 4 for 4 with the Washington Commanders since they traded for him. We'll see if it works out. But, of course, with a rookie quarterback, when you have the chance to score points, you got to score points, or else you're just putting yourself behind the power curve even more. So those three things need to happen. If the Tampa Bay Buccaneers lose this game, it's going to be because this pass rush – I love Yaya Diaby. I don't think he's ready to be the feature part of a pass rush. Vita Vea, if Vita Vea or Kalijah Kancey are the most dominant part of the pass rush, that's great for Vita Vea and Kalijah Kancey. But as we saw the Buccaneers do when Vita Vea led the team in sacks, they very much wanted to change that and make sure that somebody else led the team in sacks. I'm not nearly as confident in Joe Tryon-Shoyinka as some people are. And, hopefully for his sake and the Bucs' sake, he proves me wrong. But I feel like you're going to see a lot of – if Yaya can do what we all have seen Yaya do, I think you're going to end up seeing a lot of rolling away from him and making him run across the entire formation to try to get Jaden Daniels, and they're going to rely on Joe Tryon-Shoyinka being isolated by one of the best guards in the National Football League in Sam Cosmi and Andrew Wiley, a Super Bowl winning veteran. So I think that's going to be a lot of what's going to happen if the Buccaneers can't counter that, and Jaden Daniels is allowed to make time, find time, and scramble. That's where, if the Buccaneers lose this game, I think Jaden Daniels probably accounting for at least 250 yards of offense and not all of that on his arm.
Thanks.
There you have it, folks. So, David, thank you so much for joining us, dude. I can't think of anyone better or more familiar with both of these organizations to hop on and talk to us. We greatly
Sun
appreciate
Devils,
your time.
more wins than both Florida State and the Gators combined.
That's probably not going to be
right.
that difficult, guys, actually. So
that's right.
That's about right.
So, fellas, so the Buccaneers, some people I think are like assuming this is going to be a blowout. Maybe some fans, I'm not sure where you guys stand on it. Like, the result of this game. It's always tough to predict the first game of the year. The Bucs are favored in Vegas by just over a field goal, 3.5 last I checked, depending on the book, for this 4:25 kickoff game. The team's mostly healthy, with the exception of Logan Hall, who popped up today with a foot injury. He was on the sidelines. I want to know, though, like what matchup, and I'm going to be doing an article on this, so I'm going to save my own choices. But what is the most intriguing matchup that you're looking forward to watching between these two teams when they meet on Sunday? Because there's quite a few, and I'm going to open this one up to whoever wants to take it, whoever has one in mind. JC's giving me that look, so I have a feeling he's the guy who wants to take it first. JC?
Yeah, and it's one that David just talked about. It's Chris Godwin versus Mike Sanistrill. That is the one where I think the Bucs can feast. Again, we're talking about a position where Godwin has excelled. We're talking about a player who looks like he was pre-ACL injury, guy whose separation was not there the last 2 seasons, and you've started to see that come back throughout training camp. He's been really impressive. His relationship with Baker, he's already the third down go-to guy for him. And I think with the move back in the slot, again, this is a player who has feasted there. Liam Cohen said he's going to be in the Cooper Kupp type-esque role. Cooper Kupp and Chris Godwin, same age when Kupp won that triple crown. Just throwing it out there. And I think he's going to have a heck of a matchup going against Mike Sanistrill this weekend. Rookie nickelback. Again, the size difference there. You want to talk about a guy, Michigan's famous for no rock, no block. Chris Godwin's going to block the heck out of him, I think. And I think that's going to help open up some running lanes. And I think he's going to be a tremendous player. I think he's going to have the most receptions and most yards this weekend.
I love that one. And man, yeah, what a tough assignment for Sanistrill in his first NFL game. Arguably probably maybe the best nickel prospect in this draft. He's going to be thrown right into the fire against one of the NFL's best in Chris Godwin. And as you mentioned, one of the most physical, undoubtedly. Caleb, bunch of rookies. A lot of people are already giving Jason Light his flowers for this rookie class before they've even stepped on an NFL field. Graham Barton is probably the easy answer, but I won't hate you if you do it. What rookie do you think is going to have the biggest impact on the outcome of this football game versus the Washington Commanders?
Specifically this game against the Commanders, I think probably the one rookie that would stand out the most, and that's going back to David's and mine, where we were talking about the defensive secondary for the Commanders. Are they going to once again struggle? And if they do, that's going to leave opportunities for a Jalen McMillan to have those, especially with all the attention paid towards Chris Godwin, as JC mentioned. And obviously Mike Evans is probably going to be the guy that they're going to look to double on occasion whenever they do. So look for Jalen McMillan to have a big game, or possibly maybe a Bucky Irving, whether that's on special teams or whatever it may be. But I think I'd feel very safe saying Jalen probably has the best game outside of a Graham Barton for this upcoming matchup, just because of the matchups that he is going to see. And he's going to be seeing kind of the guys that aren't necessarily thought of as the top secondary DBs on that roster there in Washington. So Jalen McMillan, the defense is going to have problems. It's going to be tough trying to corral Jaden Daniels, no matter what team he's on. It's not an easy job to do. He had a pretty good team at LSU both the years that he was there, but you saw him put himself into positions that weren't necessarily beneficial to his team or to, his body or injury. So I think having to chase him around is going to tire out that defense. The only really guys we're probably going to really see much time of back there, rookie wise, are probably going to be Tyke and Grant or Braswell. So those are the really two, but they're going to be busy trying to figure out their own stuff. So Jalen can kind of just slot right in, get right to it, and just not have to worry about much because he knows all the attention is going to be elsewhere, and he'll be able to play very free against a less than stellar Commanders secondary.
Shout out to everyone watching on YouTube and hitting us up with comments. Bat W, we're going to run over the Commanders D. Lucas Pettis, very optimistic about the matchup for the Buccaneers with the receivers versus the Commanders DBs. Love the support, folks. Get those questions in. We'll try and answer them during the show. We're a bit jam-packed with David hopping on as a guest, so if we don't get to them all, please don't hate us, but we will always try our darndest.
Whatever that prop bet is for Jalen McMillan week 1, hammer it.
The over. You like
be 20 or 30 something yards, because I know Xavier Worthy's is 41 something. So I would expect it to be lower for McMillan. So probably a pretty decent bet.
4 or 5 for 50 yards, somewhere around there, I think is what he gets.
Oh, that's what you think he gets. I thought you were trying to say that's what the line would be. And I was like, heck
no.
no.
I think that's what he gets. I think 4 catches around anywhere between 41, 51 yards, I think is probably definitely over than his prop bet. So
definitely would be over. River, there is a narrative that exists, whether it is
always typically,
yes, that's true. Many. But in this case, I'm talking about the narrative or the belief that Todd Bowles struggles against rookie quarterbacks. It exists, right? Is it real? Do you share any of that concern as it applies to this matchup against Jaden Daniels? Because we're talking about the number 2 overall pick in the draft, a guy with elite dynamic athleticism. He can throw the deep ball, ton of skills. David says he's only thrown 1 interception according to his charts throughout all of training camp. Like, are you worried at all here about is this a real thing, this rookie quarterback thing versus Todd Bowles, or is it fiction?
This claim has been fact-checked by BucsGameday experts. False. Todd Bowles is in fact 10-5 against rookie quarterbacks. I believe technically he's 10-4 because if you take away that game where Desmond Ridder beat the Bucs in Atlanta, he wasn't playing a lot of his starters, and they were up at the half when they were. So I think Todd Bowles offers a lot of really complex looks on defense. I think for rookie quarterbacks, that's really, really tough to play against, especially if you're Jaden Daniels and this is week 1 and this is your introduction to the National Football League. This is probably going to be very difficult. The Bucs did struggle with rookie quarterbacks actually before Todd Bowles came, but since Todd Bowles has been here, they've actually been quite successful, and I don't see why that's not going to continue. I think Jaden Daniels has the means to be a good football player for sure in the NFL, but he might be seeing some crazy looks, just like Kirk Cousins and the Vikings got some crazy looks last week in week 1. You had Kalijah Cansey moving around. You had a lot of different defensive line formation shifting, and I think we're going to see a lot of the same thing as Commanders, and probably even some more mix-ups because, like you said, it's a rookie quarterback. Todd Bowles is going to try and confuse him as much as possible, and I think he will. So we want to see how, A, the Bucs are able to execute that, and B, how Jaden Daniels is able to react to that.
Okay. And I'm really excited to see Liam Cohen's debut here as the play caller in the regular season game. Like what we can pretend that we can analyze his preseason calls and sequencing, but we really can't. Like he's smart enough. He's saving all the good stuff for the regular season. He's going to want to come out and lead his team to a W. So I'm looking forward to that. Before we get out of here, I want to get some score predictions from y'all. So JC, you lead us off. What is your prediction for the Buccaneers week 1 matchup versus the Washington Commanders at Raymond James Stadium?
Yeah, I don't think this week is any indication of what the Commanders will be, because I actually think they're going to be better than what some people think they are going to be. Their final record will be. Obviously, they're the second worst team in the league last year, but I think they made some solid pieces, solid moves. A lot of new moving parts, though, on offense, on defense. Head coach, everywhere on that organization. There's a lot of turnover. They signed the most free agents and brought in the most players. And you kind of look at every position group, there's a new player in there somewhere, and a lot of them multiple positions. So it takes time for that chemistry to gel. And as David said earlier, the offensive line hasn't played a single pass rep together. Like the rookie left tackle, Brandon Coleman, hasn't played except for a handful of snaps, was out with a pec injury. On the injury report, looks good to go. But still, I think there's going to be a lot of growing pains before everything starts to click, and I do think it will. I just don't think it's going to click week 1. And I think they have some matchups that they can exploit, but I think the Bucs have more matchups that they can exploit. And I've got the Bucs winning, going over Vegas's line there. I've got the Bucs winning 27-17 right now. Could change by the time our final predictions come out, but I'm pretty confident in that. Bucs win by 10 points, 27-17 is the final score.
I like that. Very similar to my own. I got the Bucs winning 27-14, actually. I think they're going to put up some points. I think the continuity is going to carry over offensively, just with the players on the field at the very least. And I think Liam Cohen's going to unlock a different element here. And there's an unpredictability to that as well, right? Because, him being at Kentucky last year, the opponents don't know what Cohen's going to throw at them either. So, and a comment that just popped up there from Lucas Pettis watching on YouTube. Appreciate you, Lucas. He said people are still sleeping on K-Dot, and I think he's going to be a beast this season. I'm with that, man. It's kind of the year for Cade, and he has just kind of quietly, gradually been improving over the course of his career. And Baker Mayfield showed a heck of a lot of trust in Cade. He went off in the playoffs, played really well, multiple touchdowns, tons of yards, lots of catches. And Baker was looking to him when he needed him most. So I definitely think Cade Otton is going to take a big step forward this year.
Bold prediction number 6, 5,505 for Cade Otton for me.
There you go. Go check that out on BucsGameday, folks. JC's got his bold predictions. But don't do that until we finish this episode, which is going to lead me to Caleb. Caleb, what is your score prediction, buddy, for this first game? I know you're very familiar with the Commanders, too, so I'm really curious to hear your take.
Yeah, absolutely. Just hearing nothing but good things coming out of Washington since, the arrival of Peters there as the GM, and then obviously with the hiring of Quinn, not Campbell. Similar guys in my mind. But anyways, I love what I'm seeing, love what I'm hearing out of there. Team just seems to be moving in the right direction. So I agree with JC. I don't think, this first game is going to kind of define who they are. They are bringing in newness every single spot that you look. And it's going to take some time for that to kind of manifest itself and, start to trend in the right direction. But a win there would be big for them, but I don't think it's going to happen. I think the Buccaneers, the more experience being at home, rookie first game as a quarterback, a little bit tougher too, going up against a Todd Bowles defense as well. The fans are going to be fired up. The players should be fired up with it being the first regular season game. That continuity that the Buccaneers have, I think just wins out ultimately. And I have the Bucs winning this one. Getting into the 30s, we're going to go 31-21 Buccaneers.
Okay, 3 high-scoring predictions so far, all flirting with that 30-point mark. Caleb was the first one to take us all the way there. So, River, are you following suit in that regard? Curious to hear your take or your prediction.
27-17, just like JC, funnily enough. I do think that the Bucs are going to score some points, at least this game. We mentioned that there are some iffy parts of that secondary in Washington, and the Bucs could be trying to take care of that, especially with Liam Cohen calling the shots. I'm excited to see how he implements this new offense, what type of shots he takes, how he calls his plays. That's going to be different from how Dave Canales does it. Not only just the plays he calls, but the situational football that he calls as well. So that's going to be a lot of fun too. Week 1's weird, man. Anything can happen. I mean, I wouldn't be surprised if anything happened in week 1. Last year, I didn't have the Bucs being the Vikings, and they did. And then not only that, the Vikings ended up not being a very good team, partially because of the injury to Kirk Cousins, but in general, they were a little lacking. And the Bucs ended up going to the divisional round of the NFC playoffs. So it's really hard to tell what's going on week 1. If anything happens, it'll happen. But like you said, Caleb, I don't think it's going to define either of these teams necessarily. But you're going to want to see some hot starts out of the gate because that's what Todd Bowles teams tend to struggle with. And if they can do that and they can get it going, put their foot on the gas, play good defense, get the offense pumping, that's what fans are going to want to see. So I think they'll do it. I think, 3 touchdowns, some field goals, 27-17.
First drive touchdown.
That would be nice. A lot of fans want to hear that. So we'll see if that happens because that was a rarity, to say the least, last year. So to see Liam Cohen's offense cook immediately like they did in the preseason game against the Dolphins, that's what the Bucs fans are going to want to see.
I wouldn't be surprised to see a first drive deep shot, too. Even if it doesn't connect, but just to say, all right, we're going to test these cornerbacks.
Set the tone.
And we're going to set the tone. And guess what? You got to defend the deep path of the year, the deep path of the field. And that's going to open up some running room for the backs as well. So
also a big area. A big area, absolutely. Football. And that's a big area that Baker Mayfield's got to improve on too. So he might want to test the waters himself there and just get in the rhythm. And I wouldn't be surprised.
I think Baker's going to refer to the mean a little bit more in terms, he has deep ball capabilities. He just struggled with it last year. I think he's going to take a step in that area this season. Just my thoughts. Unfortunately for all the Bucs fans, either watching us live right now on YouTube or listening later from their preferred podcast hub, if you will, all 4 of us picked the Bucs to win. So let's just hope we didn't just curse your favorite football team. But yeah, I think either way, you got to be excited. NFL football is here, man. We've been waiting a long time for this, and it's finally time to fire those cannons at Raymond James Stadium. I'm pumped up. Who's going to be there? Are all three of you guys going to be there, or just a couple of you guys?
All four of us,
All
David
three.
included.
David, right? Yeah, is that
Yeah.
fact? David too.
Yeah.
Awesome.
DGCG in the house. Izzy.
You're gonna have 4 members of the Bucks Game Day team covering this game live on Sunday at 4:25. That's why you stick. Dude, you really gotta. You gotta kill my outro like that. That's nasty work, dude. Anyway, as I was saying, that is why you. God. That is why you stick with Bucs Game Day, Sports Illustrated's only website dedicated specifically to covering the Tampa Bay Buccaneers. Visit the website, like, subscribe, share on YouTube, please. Rate and review wherever you can, and join us every Wednesday evening at 8 p.m. Eastern Time. We'll get your comments if you get them in there to the best of our ability. And until next week, we will have an actual game to reflect on and analyze, and another one to look forward to, and 15 after that. So here we are, folks. Have a good night. Thanks for joining us. Go Bucks. Be well.
Peace.